Tania Head was just one of 19 people who had been above the point of impact in the South Tower, lived to tell about it. After being badly burned, Tania witnessed the decapitation of her assistant before coming across a dying man who begged her to deliver his wedding ring to his wife. Her own survival, she said, was made possible by the thoughts of beautiful white dress she would be wearing for her fiancé Dave on their wedding day. But Tania, you see, had a very dark secret. She wasn't even in the United States on September 11th. It was all a lie.
On September 11th, 2001, the world watched in horror as the Twin Towers fell, leaving behind a nation in mourning and a community of survivors bound by trauma. Among them, or so it seemed, was Tania Head, a charismatic woman whose harrowing story of escape from the South Tower and personal loss made her a prominent voice for the survivors of September 11th. She became president of the World Trade Center Survivors Network, comforted grieving families, and guided tourists through Ground Zero with an authenticity no one thought to question. Then, in 2007, the truth emerged. Tania Head had not been in New York on 9/11. She wasn't even in the United States. The 2012 documentary, The Woman Who Wasn't There, unpacks this extraordinary deception, forcing us to confront unsettling questions about why people invent trauma, how collective grief can be manipulated, and the ways in which survivor identity can be both a source of healing and a target for exploitation. Tania Head's story was constructed with meticulous emotional engineering. She positioned herself not just as a survivor, but as one of the most wounded. She claimed that on the morning of September 11, 2001, she was at work for Merrill Lynch on the 78th floor of the South Tower, placing her among the mere 19 people who were located at or above the impact zone. According to Head, her fiancé, Dave, was in the North Tower when it was struck, linking her personal tragedy to both buildings in the attack. In her telling, she survived with catastrophic injuries, the most severe being the near-complete severing of her arm, which she said was left attached by only a small flap of skin. She described moments of extreme human connection amid the chaos, including an encounter with a dying man who gave her his wedding ring, a token she later claimed to have returned to his widow. Head also asserted that her rescue came at the hands of Wells Crowther, a real-life hero of that day. Crowther, an equities trader and volunteer firefighter, is known to have saved multiple people before losing his own life in the collapse. In Head's account, he guided her to safety before she was rushed to the hospital, where she remained immediately after escaping the tower. Each element of her tale mirrored familiar 9/11 narratives, creating an instant sense of authenticity. In a community defined by tragedy, her vivid recollections and willingness to speak publicly made her a beacon for others struggling to process their grief. Her deception reveals how deeply we rely on narrative coherence to validate truth. Survivors recognized their own pain in her words. The public saw a living symbol of resilience. The more compelling her story became, the less inclined anyone was to question it. In the aftermath of collective trauma, there is often a hunger for stories that embody both suffering and survival. Head simply stepped into that vacuum, knowing no one wanted to believe a person could lie about something so sacred. The World Trade Center Survivors Network was founded to serve the needs of those who lived through the attacks, to honor the memories of the victims, and to advocate for the social services survivors might require. Tania Head did not simply join this community. She quickly became one of its most prominent figures. Her extreme and emotionally charged story, coupled with a magnetic personality, made her an ideal public representative for the group. Head led tours of the World Trade Center site, offering visitors first-hand accounts that seemed to embody both the tragedy and resilience of 9/11. She appeared in photographs alongside Mayor Michael Bloomberg and former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, further cementing her role as a recognizable face of the survivor community. What makes Head's case particularly chilling is how far she embedded herself in the survivor network. She was not a peripheral figure, she was at its center, organizing memorial events and shaping the public image of 9/11 survivors. Her deception was not a fleeting con. It was a long-term occupation of a sacred social role. In this way, the trauma imposter does more than just lie. They occupy emotional space that rightfully belongs to the people who lived through the tragedy. According to the documentary, the turning point came when the New York Times expressed interest in profiling Tania Head, not because her account raised suspicion, but because it appeared to be an extraordinary and uplifting tale of survival. As part of their standard investigative process, the reporters began to fact-check the details of her story. That routine step quickly exposed troubling discrepancies. Merrill Lynch, the firm where Head claimed to have worked on the morning of the attacks, had no record of her employment. Likewise, neither Harvard nor Stanford, the prestigious universities she said she had attended, could find any record of her enrollment. When the Times attempted to interview her about these inconsistencies, Head's response was intense and emotional. She reportedly panicked and broke down in tears, prompting members of the World Trade Center Survivors Network to rally around her in a protective show of loyalty. Yet even within the group, some began to express quiet confusion and frustration. If her story was true, why couldn't she provide simple proof? As the truth unraveled, even the personal details that had once seemed unassailable proved to be fabrications. Dave, the man she claimed as her fiancé lost in the North Tower, was in fact a real victim of the attacks. But there is no evidence that he and Head had ever met. Investigators believe she discovered his name while researching September 11th casualties and wove his memory into her narrative to lend it emotional weight. Part of what made Head's account so convincing was that she did bear visible scars and burns on her arm. These, however, had nothing to do with the events of September 11th. They were the result of a car accident years earlier during a trip with friends in Barcelona. By intertwining her personal injuries with the real suffering of others, she crafted a narrative that blurred the line between truth and fiction, earning trust and sympathy she had never truly earned. Her story became a carefully constructed mosaic of borrowed pain and personal history, designed to convince others of a survival that never truly belonged to her. Cases like Tania Head's are rare, but not unprecedented. Psychologists have noted that some imposters adopt fabricated trauma as a means of gaining attention, admiration, or a sense of belonging they feel is otherwise unattainable. Others claim that individuals exploit tragedies like 9/11 for financial gain, collecting donations, charging appearance fees, or securing other tangible benefits. There is no evidence that Tania Head profited monetarily from her deception. Whatever rewards she derived from the charade appeared to have been social and emotional rather than financial. She gained admiration, status, and a sense of belonging within a community defined by shared trauma, benefits that, while intangible, were powerful enough to sustain her elaborate falsehood for years. While the motives vary, from narcissistic gratification to deep-seated identity issues, the result is the same. A false survivor is embraced by a community built on mutual trust and shared pain. When Head's deception was revealed, the damage was not just reputational, it was deeply personal for those she had befriended. Many survivors reported feelings of betrayal that compounded their existing trauma. She had infiltrated a community of people for whom trust was both fragile and essential, and her exposure threatened to delegitimize the work of genuine survivor advocates. Moreover, the scandal risked creating a culture of suspicion around survivor narratives in general. If one story could be fabricated so convincingly, how could the public be sure others were genuine? This erosion of trust represents one of the most harmful legacies of a trauma imposter. They don't just deceive individuals, they undermine the credibility of survivor identity itself. The Woman Who Wasn't There is more than a documentary about one woman's deception. It is a cautionary tale about the vulnerabilities inherent in collective grief. In the wake of tragedy, communities and societies alike become more trusting of those who claim to share in the pain. That openness can be a powerful force for healing, but it is also what allows imposters to slip inside. Tania Head's story forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. Should survivor communities gatekeep their own membership more strictly? Does public empathy make us too willing to accept compelling narratives without verification? And how can we balance the need to honor stories of trauma with the responsibility to ensure they are true? The case of Tania Head is both an individual act of deception and a mirror held up to the way we process tragedy as a society. The trauma imposter thrives where emotional hunger for inspiring stories meets a lack of verification. By examining her story, the woman who wasn't there invites us to reckon with the fragility of trust, the ethics of storytelling, and the enduring human need to make sense of catastrophe, even if it means believing in someone who was never there.